A golden retriever once labeled too dangerous to be loved. A veteran no one could reach anymore, not even himself. When these two broken souls crossed paths, something unimaginable happened. Not with barking, not with commands, but with a single moment of quiet trust that would change an entire town forever. You won't believe where this story goes. So, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us because what follows will warm your heart in ways you didn't expect. The sun was hiding behind heavy clouds that rolled low over the sky of Willow Creek, Colorado, a town small enough for everyone to know each other, but big enough to bury the kind of pain no one dared to name. The late autumn air had a bite to it, the kind that made old wooden signs creak and wine chimes tremble like anxious whispers. A cold drizzle dusted the streets, tapping lightly on the windows of the local animal control shelter, a boxy red brick building at the edge of town that smelled faintly of bleach and hopelessness. Inside, kennel number 9, a large golden retriever named Brutus lay motionless on the concrete floor, his matted coat dull like old hay and stained by months of neglect. He was 6 years old, though his frame looked older, bones heavy from trauma rather than time. His broad chest, once proud, was now curled in defensive stillness. His eyes, a deep amber, carried no curiosity, only caution. A red tag hung from his cage. Aggressive, returned, 3X, not to be touched. The handlers avoided him, not out of hatred but fear. Brutus had been labeled a danger after 3 separate adoptions ended in bites, broken furniture, and bruised limbs. Each time the humans claimed they had tried. Each time Brutus had failed. The last family brought him back with a stitched-up teenage son and a police report. There had even been a date set for euthanasia. It was only pushed back because the town vet had quit suddenly, and the nearest facility was 2 towns over. Across the town, in a small blue house with chipped shutters and overgrown grass, Tyler Granger was pouring coffee with trembling hands. Tyler was 35, tall, lean, and always appeared one thought away from some far-off battlefield. A former Army combat medic, Tyler had returned from his 3rd deployment with a medical discharge and an invisible fracture in his soul. PTSD had left his nights restless, his mornings gray. His once boyish face was marked by faint scars on his temple and a constant weight in his gaze. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it looked like a memory rather than a reaction. Tyler had tried therapy group sessions, even church. None of it stuck. He lived alone, working part-time as a mechanic, taking only the quiet shifts, never the rush hours, never the school traffic. He avoided parks, loud places, and worst of all, mirrors. But what broke him most wasn't the war. It was the silence afterward, the feeling that no one truly knew what to do with broken men like him. That morning, something inside Tyler itched an old instinct, the same one that used to make him run toward the screaming, not away from it. He didn't know why, but he drove to the animal control shelter, the rain thudding softly on his windshield. He told the receptionist, a stocky woman named Joyce, who wore her hair in a tight bun and had a face like an unpaid parking ticket, that he was looking for a dog. "It's something quiet," he said. "Maybe older, not too hyper." Joyce raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to adopt Hawn? We got more problem cases than cuddly lapdogs these days." She looked him over. "Though, we do have one that nobody touches. Big one. Real bad rep. You look like the type that doesn't scare easy." She led him past the whimpers and tail wags until they reached Kennel 9. "That's Brutus," she said, pointing at the red tag cage. "You don't want him, I promise you that." Tyler knelt slowly. His army boots squeaked slightly against the linoleum. Brutus didn't lift his head. Tyler studied him, not with pity, but with a strange kind of recognition. The way the dog curled into himself, the way he didn't bark or growl, just waited for the world to hurt him again. "He looks tired," Tyler said quietly. "He is," Joyce muttered. "We all are around here." Tyler didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "Can I sit with him?" Joyce hesitated. "Not inside. Policy." "Then open the cage. I'll sit right there," he said, nodding to the floor outside. "Just let me see him. You get bit, it's on you." Understood. The door creaked open. Tyler sat cross-legged on the cold floor just outside the kennel. Rain tapped on the metal roof above. For over 10 minutes, neither man nor beast moved. Then Brutus lifted his head just slightly and looked at Tyler, Amber eyes met storm-worn blue. In that glance, something wordless passed between them, a kind of exhausted truce. Tyler didn't speak. He didn't reach. He just sat, rain leaking through his jacket collar, and Brutus didn't snarl. He didn't charge. He simply lay his head back down, but this time not curled against the corner, but facing toward Tyler. The next day the red tag was removed, and Brutus went home with the man who saw past the mark. The morning after Brutus arrived at his new home was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of stillness that hangs thick in the air when two strangers share a space built for trust, but not yet touched by it. Tyler Granger opened the front door of his small blue house, letting in the crisp bite of late autumn air. The wind carried the scent of pine and wet earth from the nearby woods. Fallen leaves rustled across the porch like dry whispers. Inside, Brutus sat rigidly near the doorway, his massive frame pressed against the corner of the room, as if trying to disappear. His coat still rough, despite a hurried bath, the night before clung to his ribs. The patch where his fur had been shaved for treatment revealed the ghost of a scar jagged and old. His eyes never left Tyler, watching every step the man took with quiet calculation. Tyler, dressed in a gray hoodie and worn jeans, moved with careful deliberation. He didn't speak, didn't reach. He placed a bowl of water near Brutus, not too close, and a plate of chicken beside it. Then he sat on the floor, back against the wall, just far enough away to give Brutus space. He sipped his coffee in silence, stealing glances that never lingered too long. Combat had taught him that eye contact in the wrong moment could feel like a threat. Brutus didn't eat right away. He watched, he waited. After nearly an hour, he approached the bowl with tense mechanical steps and began to drink. It wasn't trust, it was survival. But it was a start. Across town at Willow Creek Elder Haven, Marla Saunders sat behind a cluttered desk, massaging her knuckles. 62 years old, short and wide-hipped, with a braid of graying chestnut hair coiled neatly at her neck, Marla had worked in elder care for nearly 4 decades. Her eyes were sharp, her tongue sharper, but beneath her no-nonsense demeanor was a heart tenderized by the weight of watching too many people fade too quietly. She'd lost her husband to early-onset Alzheimer's 7 years prior, and since then she'd treated every resident in the Haven like family, maybe too much. Marla clicked through her emails, most of them dull or bureaucratic, but one subject line caught her eye. Therapy Dog Pilot Program. Request for candidates. She read the details: an initiative to bring emotionally rehabilitated animals to nursing homes. The benefits were clear: reduced anxiety, lowered blood pressure, boosted morale. She sighed. Good idea. Shame we never have dogs calm enough for it. Still, something tugged at her. A memory vague and foggy of a therapy dog visit from years ago. How one resident, a grizzled old man named Walt, had smiled so wide his dentures nearly fell out. That dog had been a golden retriever too. Marla looked up from her desk and stepped into the common room, where Walter Delaney, now 90 and blind, sat humming tunelessly near the window. Once a school principal, Walter had kept his wit, but lost much of his sight. He wore brown suspenders over a plaid shirt, and always had a harmonica in his pocket, though he rarely played anymore. Morning, Walt, Marla said. Still no dog, he replied, half smiling. Still no dog. But maybe soon. Back at the house, Tyler spent the afternoon fixing the old sink. He didn't expect Brutus to follow him into the kitchen, but he did. Slowly, carefully, tail low, but not tucked. Tyler pretended not to notice. He hummed a habit he picked up in the field hospitals, a way to keep his hands steady under pressure. That night, it rained again. Brutus lay curled under the table, watching lightning crawl across the ceiling. Tyler sat at the window, thinking about the look in Brutus's eyes. Not rage, not madness. Just something wounded, something trapped in a cycle it didn't understand. 2 days later, a knock came at the door. Tyler opened it to find Sarah Pennington, a petite woman in her early 30s with auburn curls tucked under a knit beanie. She held a clipboard and wore a volunteer badge for the Willow Creek Animal Welfare Association. Her boots were muddy, her cheeks flushed from the cold. You must be Mr. Granger, she said cheerfully. I'm Sarah. I handle post-adoption follow-ups. Just here to see how Brutus is settling in. Tyler nodded. He's adjusting. Mind if I see him? Tyler stepped aside. Sarah entered with a warm, practiced calm, crouching just enough to make herself small but confident. Brutus appeared from the hallway, his gaze locked on her. He didn't bark, but didn't approach either. "You're a big boy, huh?" she said, smiling gently. "Scared more people than most thunderclouds, I bet." Brutus took a step closer, then another. He sniffed her shoe, then sat. Sarah blinked. "Well, that's unexpected. He's not what people say," Tyler said quietly. "No animal is," Sarah replied. "Only what they're made to become." As she left, Sarah turned back. "There's a lady at the Haven named Marla looking for a dog to cheer up her residents. Might be good for Brutus." "You ever think about therapy work?" Tyler scoffed. "He's not ready." Sarah smiled. "Neither are most of us, but we try anyway." That night, Brutus lay near the couch while Tyler dozed off watching an old documentary. When thunder struck, Brutus didn't run. He stood, walked over and curled next to Tyler's legs. He didn't lean in, but he didn't leave. Outside, the wind eased. The storm passed. Inside, the healing had only just begun. The week passed in quiet waves. Brutus no longer clung to corners, but still moved with the careful steps of someone who expected the world to snap back at him. Tyler began to understand the dog's rhythm, the way his ears would tilt before a storm, the way he avoided doorways like they once slammed on him, and the soft, almost imperceptible whine he let out in his sleep. One gray Saturday, Tyler decided it was time to properly groom Brutus. The dog's fur had begun to clump around the hips and chest, and despite a few earlier baths, the coat still held the stubborn weight of shelter life. Tyler dragged out a plastic bin from the garage that hadn't seen sunlight in years. Inside were clippers, brushes, antiseptic spray, and a bottle of lavender shampoo from a time before combat boots and silence. He set it all on the back porch where the November sun blinked through thinning clouds. Brutus approached cautiously, but sat as instructed. Tyler didn't tie, him didn't force his body. Instead, he spoke low and slow. "We'll go easy, okay? You call the shots." As he ran the brush down Brutus's spine, thick tangles pulled away like discarded memories. That's when Tyler noticed them. Not one, not two, but a trail of pale ridge scars, some circular, others long and straight, etched into the skin beneath the golden coat. A cluster around the neck, too symmetrical to be random. Another set near the back legs, and above the shoulder, a small rectangular patch where the fur refused to grow at all. Tyler dropped the brush. He pressed his hand gently to the scar near Brutus's ribs, feeling the raised skin. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move, just looked back at him with eyes that held no secrets because they had already said all they needed to in silence. Tyler's jaw tightened. His chest swelled with something bitter. He had seen marks like these before. On soldiers, on prisoners, on people who had been restrained for too long and punished for crying out. He reached for the antiseptic spray, his hand steadier than expected. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" he whispered. Brutus blinked slowly, and for the first time leaned his weight heavy and warm against Tyler's knee. Later that evening, Tyler made a call. The line rang twice before Sarah picked up. She sounded winded. "Hello?" "It's Tyler," he said. "There's something I need to ask you." Sarah, always brisk but patient, asked if she could stop by the next morning. Sunday arrived with frost on the windows and a sun too tired to rise above the rooftops. Sarah knocked this time with a folder tucked under her arm. She wore her usual wool beanie, a faded parka, and jeans dusted with dog hair. Her nose was red from the cold, but her eyes, hazel and always alert, remained calm. "Tell me what you found," she said, as Tyler poured her coffee. He showed her the scars gently parting Brutus's fur, while the dog lay half asleep near the radiator. Sarah leaned in and nodded, her brow furrowed. "I was afraid of that. We don't have the full story. He came from a seizure case out in Marlow County. Backyard breeder. The kind that cages animals 24/7. Some of them had shock collars wired illegally." Tyler's throat clenched. "He's not broken." "No," Sarah said firmly. "He's a survivor." That afternoon, Tyler sat on the floor, with Brutus sketching the shape of the scars in a notebook, like a field medic charting a wound. He didn't need the data. He needed to understand. Brutus watched him work, occasionally resting his head on Tyler's arm, as if to say, "You don't need to fix me, I'm already here." Meanwhile, across town, Marla was still mulling over the therapy dog idea. Her desk was now covered with brochures, printouts, and a few handwritten notes she kept under her coffee mug like secrets. She'd brought it up to the home's director, a lanky woman in her 40s named Denise Hall. who had tight curls, large round glasses, and a way of blinking slowly when rejecting ideas. A therapy dog with a bite record, Denise had scoffed. Marla, we have Alzheimer's patients who think the mailman is a spy. I can't take that liability. But the residents need connection. Marla pushed. Walter talks about dogs every single day. Half our folks used to own pets. Some of them don't respond to anyone but animals. I understand that Denise said her voice softer this time. But if something goes wrong, you'll be the one holding the leash literally. Then I'll take full responsibility, Marla replied. Let me talk to the owner first. Maybe there's more to the story than a report. Denise sighed. You have until the end of the month. Then we're locking that program down. That night, Marla picked up her landline, dialed the number Sarah had given her, and left a message. Mr. Granger, this is Marla Saunders from Willow Creek, Elder Haven. I'd like to meet your dog. I don't expect miracles, but I believe in second chances. Call me. Back at the house, Tyler played an old jazz record from his father's collection. The needle crackled. Brutus lay sprawled across the rug, his chest rising and falling, like he'd finally found a shore to rest on. Outside, the wind rustled the dry maple leaves in the yard. Inside, the storm had already passed. The morning air in Willow Creek was sharp and clean, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and pine. Frost clung to the edges of parked cars and rooftops, glittering faintly beneath the pale gold of the rising sun. Tyler stood on his porch, one hand gripping Brutus's leash, the other jammed in his jacket pocket. The dog stood still beside him, head slightly lowered, eyes scanning the quiet street. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Tyler brought Brutus home, and though the dog's physical wounds had begun to fade, the emotional distance between them narrowed only inch by inch. That morning, they were waiting for someone. A dusty white station wagon pulled into the driveway, and a familiar woman stepped out. Marla Saunders, dressed in a long brown coat and a thick plaid scarf, moved with the kind of brisk determination common to people who had spent a lifetime organizing chaos. Her hair, a swirl of gray and chestnut, was pinned neatly beneath a beret. She carried a canvas tote that bore the stitched logo of Willow Creek Elder Haven and walked with a slight limp, the result of a hip surgery 3 winters ago, a detail Tyler only learned after asking Sarah. Marla's face was not soft, but neither was it unkind. Years of caring for people who were slowly disappearing had taught her that sugarcoating the truth was often crueler than the truth itself. She squinted at Brutus. That's the one. Tyler nodded. Yeah, this is Brutus. Brutus stood his ground tail, still gaze fixed on Marla's boots. She knelt slowly, not extending a hand, just making herself smaller. You're a big boy, aren't you? She murmured. Bet you've heard more shouting than singing in your life. Brutus sniffed once, then twice. His ears didn't flatten, and he didn't retreat. For Tyler, that was as good as a handshake. They drove in silence to the Haven. Brutus sitting in the back seat of Tyler's truck, head occasionally bumping the glass as he looked outside. Marla gave brief directions, occasionally glancing back. I'm not expecting miracles, she said, but we've got a few residents who still light up when they hear a dog bark. The Willow Creek Elder Haven was a 2-story building, with ivy creeping up one side and wind chimes swaying from the covered porch. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender disinfectant and something warm, maybe oatmeal or fresh-baked bread. The lobby was quiet, the sound of a TV playing softly in another room drifting down the hallway. Marla led them to the common room, a wide open space with large windows and scattered armchairs, where half a dozen elderly residents sat in loose clusters. Some dozed with blankets over their knees, others stared at puzzles or watched birds outside. One man sat by himself near the piano wearing a wide-brimmed hat indoors and humming under his breath. That's Walter, Marla whispered. He's mostly blind, used to be a school principal. Walter Delaney was in his 90s with a white beard that made him look part philosopher, part sea captain. His plaid shirt was buttoned up to the top suspenders, pulling against narrow shoulders. Though his eyes were milky and unfocused, his hearing was sharp. He turned his head slightly toward them. I hear claws on the tile, Walter said with a chuckle. Is that the therapy mutt you mentioned? Marla grinned. Not a mutt. A golden retriever. Name's Brutus. Brutus, Walter laughed. That's not a dog, that's a Roman senator. Marla guided Tyler and Brutus toward Walter's chair. Tyler knelt beside the dog, giving a slight tug on the leash. Easy, boy. Brutus approached cautiously. He didn't wag his tail, but he didn't growl either. When Walter extended a hand, Brutus sniffed his fingers, then gently rested his chin on the man's lap. Walter let out a breath like a sigh of memory. "You feel like a big one. Remind me of Charlie. He was mine for 15 years. Had a bark that could knock birds out of the sky, but never hurt a soul." Tyler stood quietly, arms crossed. Brutus didn't move. Walter's hand drifted up to the dog's head, patting it softly, rhythmically. From across the room, another resident, Mavis Thompson, a woman in her late 80s with stark white hair pulled into a bun and a floral shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watched with cautious eyes. Mavis was a retired librarian who rarely spoke, but Marla had often caught her mouthing the names of long-gone pets when she thought no one was listening. After a few minutes, Mavis stood and walked slowly to where Brutus lay beside Walter. "Golden Retriever?" she asked, voice raspy. "Yes, ma'am," Tyler replied. "He looks like Benjamin," she whispered. "My husband used to call him our yellow shadow. That dog never left my side." Brutus lifted his head and looked at her. Then slowly he stood and walked toward her. Mavis froze, her hands clutching the edges of her shawl. Brutus stopped in front of her and sat, his head tilted upward, waiting. She reached down hesitantly, then stroked his back once, twice. Her hand trembled. Marla, watching nearby, blinked away tears. "She hasn't touched anyone in months," she murmured. That afternoon, Brutus visited 3 more residents. One of them, a former jazz musician, with trembling hands, played a shaky tune on the piano, while Brutus lay at his feet. Another, an ex-farmer named Gus, insisted on giving Brutus part of his lunch, despite strict diabetic restrictions. At the end of the visit, Walter turned to Marla and said, "You bring him back, you hear? Bring him back every week if you can." Marla looked at Tyler. Well, Tyler looked at Brutus, who, for the first time since he came home, was lying belly-up tongue, lolling slightly, surrounded by 3 elderly strangers who no longer seemed so alone. He nodded. "We'll be back." It was the 3rd Thursday of the month when the storm rolled in, sudden and heavy, dropping curtains of rain over Willow Creek, like a secret trying to be kept. The air thickened with humidity, and the sharp crack of thunder echoed between houses like cannon fire. Inside his modest home, Tyler Granger sat on the edge of his bed, shirt damp with sweat fists clenched in the sheets. Night had fallen hours ago, but sleep refused to come peacefully. The room was dim, lit only by the soft blue hue of the alarm clock. 2:46 a.m. Brutus lay curled on the rug by the door tail, flicking slightly with every boom of thunder, eyes half open. He had been resting easier these days, more comfortable with Tyler, more confident around strangers. But tonight felt different. He could sense it. Tyler gasped suddenly in his sleep. His body jerked, one leg kicking against the bed frame. Sweat poured from his temples as his chest rose and fell in ragged motions. In his dream, he was back in Mosul. There was smoke, screams, a boy no older than 10 crying for help, and Tyler running through rubble with a medic bag over one shoulder. Then the explosion, bright, deafening, and the awful weight of being buried alive. Somewhere in the chaos, he could hear barking. No, not barking. Screaming. His own, waking or dreaming, he couldn't tell. Brutus stood now, ears perked forward. He padded silently toward the bed, sniffed once at Tyler's leg, then placed a paw heavy and deliberate on the man's knee. Tyler bolted upright with a shout. His breath came in gasps, wild and shallow, his pupils wide with confusion. It took him several seconds to realize where he was. His eyes locked with Brutus's, and the dog didn't flinch. He simply held his paw in place, then as gently as possible nudged Tyler's chest with his nose. "You're here," Tyler whispered hoarsely. "I'm here. It's not real." Brutus stayed beside him, head resting now on the mattress. He didn't wag his tail, didn't offer comfort the way trained service dogs were taught to. Instead, he simply remained present, unwavering, and that was enough. Later that morning, Tyler sat on the porch with a blanket over his shoulders, a mug of coffee growing cold in his hands. Brutus lay beside him, chin on his paws, watching the street like a silent sentry. Tyler had said little since the nightmare, but his silence wasn't hollow. It was contemplative. He reached down and ran his hand across Brutus's back, fingers tracing the fur in absent circles. "You pulled me back," he murmured. "You brought me home." Across town, at Willow Creek, Elder Haven, Marla was writing up a report. It wasn't mandatory, but she kept one for every therapy visit. Notes on the residents' reactions, emotional improvements, dietary infractions, mostly thanks to Gus sneaking cookies. But today she paused her typing when a knock came at her door. It was Denise Hall, the facility director, holding a copy of the local paper. She looked tired, but curious. Her frame was thin, almost fragile beneath her blazer, and her eyes, usually stern, were soft this morning. "You see this?" Denise asked, setting the paper down. On the front page was a photo taken discreetly by one of the nurses, Walter sitting with Brutus curled at his feet, eyes closed, a hand resting on the dog's back. Marla smiled. "It's real, isn't it? Not just in our heads. I've had 3 families ask if Brutus is available for regular visits," Denise said. "Even one donation offer from the State Kennel Club. They want to fund pet therapy programs for rural homes." Marla's lips pressed together. "I told you some dogs just need someone to believe in them." Back at Tyler's house, Sarah stopped by unannounced. She wore a forest green rain jacket and carried a small container of baked goods, her attempt at casual support. Her auburn curls were tied back messily, and despite the light bags under her eyes, she smiled easily. "I heard about the paper," she said, handing him the container. "Lemon bars. My sister says they cure just about everything except bad decisions." Tyler chuckled faintly. "Good. I've got plenty of those." She sat beside him, eyeing Brutus. "He looks more relaxed. He kept me from going under last night," Tyler admitted, voice low. "I had one of the bad ones. Woke up thinking I was somewhere else. He was already there, just waiting." Sarah leaned back, her expression thoughtful. "They know, somehow, they just know." Tyler nodded. "I used to think dogs were about control training, discipline, giving commands, but he doesn't follow orders. He just shows up." "That's trust," Sarah said, "not obedience." That afternoon, Tyler brought Brutus back to the Haven. The residents greeted the pair like old friends. Gus had carved a bone-shaped nameplate out of wood and placed it on the table beside Brutus's usual corner. Mavis brought a photo of her old golden Benjamin and showed it to Brutus, who sniffed at the laminated paper as though he understood. But it was Walter who noticed the difference most. "You look clearer today," he said to Tyler. "Like your shadow's shorter." "Had a long night," Tyler replied. "Must have been the dog then," Walter said. "Charlie used to pull me through the fog, too. Not with barking, just with being there." Marla watched them all from the hallway, arms crossed, heart swelling, with a kind of quiet pride. Later, as the sun began to dip below the treetops and cast long golden streaks across the floor, Tyler knelt beside Brutus, running his hand through the thick fur at his neck. "You didn't just save me last night," he whispered. "You reminded me that I'm still worth saving." Brutus blinked slowly and leaned into the touch, no longer flinching, no longer afraid. The morning of Brutus's official therapy, dog debut, came wrapped in a thin veil of fog. Willow Creek looked like it had been dipped in quiet trees, frozen in stillness, mailboxes beaded with dew, and the sidewalks empty, but for the occasional jogger in a reflective vest. Inside Tyler Granger's small home, the scent of toast mingled with the clean musk of dog shampoo. Brutus sat in the kitchen doorway, his coat freshly brushed, and his collar now bearing a small brass tag, engraved simply with his name. Tyler dressed in dark slacks and a button-down shirt. His first impressions matter outfit moved with a certain tension. He wasn't nervous about Brutus. He was nervous about what people might see in him. There was something strangely intimate about walking into a room full of strangers and introducing your dog as a healer when you yourself were still healing. Brutus followed him closely as they stepped out into the fog. He no longer tugged at the leash or scanned every noise for threat. His steps matched Tyler's pace, not trained, just in tune. Willow Creek Elder Haven had been dressed for the occasion. Marla had asked the activities coordinator, Shannon Lee, to prepare something small but welcoming. Shannon, an energetic Chinese-American woman in her late 20s, with sharp cheekbones, short choppy black hair, and a booming laugh, had joined the facility after a burnout from working corporate HR. She now dedicated herself to filling seniors' lives with creativity and dignity. She decorated the common room with modest streamers and a hand-painted cardboard sign, "Brutus the Brave, welcome to the Haven." As Tyler and Brutus stepped through the automatic doors, Shannon clapped her hands together. "There's the star of the show." Brutus paused just inside the entrance, sniffing the air. He recognized the scent of floor wax and warm applesauce from past visits. His ears perked tail still, but relaxed. Tyler looked around. Several residents were already waiting in the common area. Walter in his usual chair by the window, Mavis seated beside him, knitting something vaguely scarf-like, Gus trying to hide a cookie under a napkin on his tray, and a new face, Mrs. Jeanette Moore, a tall, slender black woman in her mid-80s with silver hair styled in tight curls, wearing a lavender sweater with pearls at the collar. She watched Brutus with a knowing smile. Marla approached Tyler, clipboard in hand. "Glad you came. We kept it small, just the residents who asked specifically for him." Tyler gave a quiet nod, then leaned down to Brutus. "Let's do this, bud." Brutus made his rounds with a patient calm that surprised even Tyler. He walked up to Walter first, resting his chin on the man's thigh. Walter chuckled and scratched behind his ears. "Still big as a horse, huh?" Mavis reached out next her hand, no longer trembling, as she offered a dog treat. Brutus took it gently, then licked her fingers once. Gus waved him over and muttered, "No idea why they think you're dangerous. You look like you'd cry if someone took your squeaky toy." The real moment came when Brutus turned toward Jeanette. She didn't beckon him or make a sound. She simply looked at him, and Brutus walked slowly to her chair and sat at her feet. Jeanette's eyes softened. "You remind me of Samson," she said in a clear, measured voice. "He was my late husband's service dog. Saved his life once when his heart gave out at the fairgrounds. The dog barked until someone came running. After my husband passed, Samson just stopped barking altogether." Brutus placed his paw on her foot. Jeanette looked at Tyler. "This one's got a soul. I can feel it." As the residents began talking more, the room buzzed gently with a different energy lighter, less clinical. Shannon handed out small photo cards of dogs in costumes sparking laughter. Marla documented interactions for the report, but more importantly, for herself. She'd seen Brutus transform before, but this was the first time she saw him heal. After about 30 minutes, Dr. Paul Rickman, the on-call geriatric psychologist, stopped by to observe. A man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, rimless glasses, and a calming presence, Dr. Rickman had always been skeptical of pet therapy. He believed in data, in charts, not wagging tails, but he couldn't deny the shift in atmosphere. He approached Marla. "Is this the same dog you told me had a bite history?" Marla nodded. 3 returns, almost euthanized. Dr. Rickman watched Brutus lay beside Jeanette as she spoke softly to him about her favorite jazz records. "I misjudged," he admitted. "This isn't just behavioral modification, it's emotional repair." Meanwhile, Shannon took candid photos for the Haven's monthly newsletter. One in particular stood out. Tyler crouched beside Brutus while Jeanette reached down to stroke the dog's head. All 3 faces visible, 2 human, 1 canine, but all carrying the same peaceful stillness. Later that afternoon, Tyler and Brutus sat outside on a bench in the Haven's small garden courtyard. The autumn leaves whispered in the breeze. Tyler looked down at Brutus, who sat upright beside him, back straight, gaze forward like a soldier at rest. "You made them laugh," Tyler said. "You made me believe." Brutus didn't respond, of course, but his body shifted slightly, pressing closer to Tyler's leg. Marla joined them outside a few minutes later, holding 2 paper cups. "Hot cider," she said, handing one to Tyler. "Don't thank me. It was Gus's idea." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Marla said eventually, "What would you think about making this a weekly thing official? We've had 5 new requests for Brutus and Dr. Rickman said he wants to include him in his therapy rotations." Tyler stared out at the garden. "I never planned to do this. I didn't think we'd fit into anyone's version of normal." Sometimes, Marla said, "we don't need to fit. We just need to show up." Tyler looked at Brutus, who now had his head resting on his lap, eyes half-lidded. "We'll be back," he said. The weather had shifted overnight, trading the dry crispness of fall for a dull, leaden sky that hung low over Willow Creek. The air smelled of impending snow, though none had fallen yet. Tyler Granger zipped up his worn navy jacket and checked the leash one last time before stepping outside with Brutus. The dog, now visibly healthier, his coat rich and glossy, his posture tall, trotted beside him with confidence. It had become routine early walks, quiet visits to the Haven, and the occasional trip to the market. This morning, however, was different. Tyler needed to pick up a prescription refill and a few groceries from Miller's General Store, a locally owned shop tucked at the corner of Main and Cedar. He hadn't taken Brutus there before, not officially, but since the therapy dog license had come through, and with Brutus wearing his new in-training vest, Tyler decided it was time to test their progress. The store was modest and nostalgic. Its front windows displayed faded holiday decor from seasons long past, and the shelves inside carried everything from canned soup to birthday cards. Behind the register stood Nancy Miller, the 60-something co-owner, with soft blue eyes, thick glasses, and a voice that always sounded like she was about to break into a lullaby. She had shoulder-length gray hair, usually tucked under a crocheted beanie, and a manner of treating every customer as if they were her own child. "Good morning, Tyler," she greeted warmly as the bell above the door chimed. "And good morning to you, Brutus. Aren't you a handsome gentleman?" Tyler gave a nod, offering a brief smile. Brutus remained quiet, alert, but relaxed. He stayed close, his eyes scanning the aisles as they walked. Tyler moved toward the pharmacy window at the back, where Eli, a young man in his early 20s, with a shy demeanor and oversized white coat, took his prescription slip. Eli had a mop of curly hair that constantly fell into his eyes, and the kind of nervous politeness that made him end every sentence with a small smile. He whispered a quick "cool dog" as he disappeared into the shelves. As Tyler waited, Brutus sat by his feet, his tail brushing slowly against the floor. Nancy made her way around the counter with a small bag of dog treats. "He's welcome here anytime," she said, crouching low. Brutus sniffed her hand, then gently took the treat, earning a soft pat on his head. But the moment was broken by the sudden slamming of the front door. A man stumbled in, mid-30s unshaven, wearing a dirty green hoodie and a black ski mask pulled halfway up his face. His jeans were stained and his eyes bloodshot. In his right hand was a pistol trembling slightly. In his left, a canvas bag. "Everybody down." Now he yelled, voice raw with panic. Nancy dropped the treat bag, her face frozen in fear. Eli peeked out from the back counter and ducked instantly. Tyler's instinct kicked in his body, going rigid as if he'd stepped into a minefield. The man pointed the gun toward Nancy. "Open the register. Don't make me do something stupid." Brutus didn't bark. He stood, still, tall, focused. Tyler's hand gripped the leash tightly, but Brutus didn't need a command. His body moved slowly, deliberately, placing himself between the gunman and Nancy. His stance was low, head-forward eyes locked on the man's trembling wrist. "Hey, Tyler," said calmly, raising a hand. "No one needs to get hurt. Just take what you need and leave." The gunman's eyes flitted between Tyler and the dog. His voice cracked. "What's with the dog?" "He's trained," Tyler said, lying. "Trained to stop threats." The gunman took a step back. "You sick him on me." "I swear I won't," Tyler replied. "But he might not wait for me to say anything if he thinks you're going to hurt someone." Brutus didn't growl. He didn't lunge. But his presence filled the space, a quiet challenge that made the man's hands tremble even harder. In the tension of that moment, Nancy, still crouched, pressed the silent alarm beneath the register. The gunman noticed. "You think I didn't see that?" He raised the gun toward her, but it was the last thing he did. Brutus surged forward in a blur of golden muscle teeth, flashing, his bark erupting like thunder. He didn't attack the man's face or throat. He lunged directly for the weapon, his powerful jaws clamping around the man's wrist with precision. The gun fired once harmlessly into the ceiling, before clattering to the ground. The robber screamed, trying to shake the dog loose, but Brutus held firm until Tyler called, "Release." Brutus stepped back, chest-heaving tongue, out eyes still locked on the man, who dropped to his knees, clutching his wrist. Police sirens blared outside seconds later. 2 officers stormed in weapons raised, but lowered them quickly upon seeing the situation under control. Nancy exhaled for the first time in minutes. Brutus stood beside Tyler, his expression neutral calm, even as officers handcuffed the robber and began collecting statements. The next morning, the local newspaper ran a front-page story: "Therapy Dog Stops Armed Robbery. Local Hero, Brutus Saves the Day." A picture taken by the store's security camera showed Brutus' mid-leap body stretched in motion between threat and protection. Marla cut the article and pinned it to the Haven's bulletin board. Sarah texted Tyler a photo of it with a line that read, "I knew he was special." But, wow, even Dr. Rickman requested a meeting to discuss Brutus's possible use in high-stress support scenarios. That evening, as Tyler and Brutus sat on their porch, snowflakes finally began to fall. Tyler reached down and scratched the space behind Brutus's ears. "No commands," he murmured. "You just knew." Brutus leaned his head against Tyler's thigh and sighed a sound of peace, not weariness. In the distance, the wind carried the faint sound of chimes. A fresh blanket of snow had fallen overnight, draping Willow Creek in soft, white silence. The town square sparkled beneath the pale winter sun, and the sharp air buzzed with anticipation. Bunting in gold and navy was strung from light posts, flapping gently in the breeze. A makeshift stage had been assembled near the courthouse steps, surrounded by folding chairs and a small podium. The people of Willow Creek, bundled in scarves and thick coats, arrived one by one, drawn by something rare, a reason to celebrate not just a dog, but a second chance. Tyler Granger stood backstage adjusting his collar. He wore a dark wool coat over a collared shirt, his hair combed with more effort than usual. By his side sat Brutus' vest-polished coat, gleaming posture upright. If the golden retriever noticed the crowd, or the low hum of reporters and photographers, he showed no sign. His gaze remained fixed on Tyler, calm and steady. "I think I'm more nervous than you," Tyler muttered. Brutus blinked slowly. In the crowd, familiar faces gathered. Marla stood with a thermos in hand, her hair tucked beneath a fur-lined hood, eyes gleaming with quiet pride. Shannon waved from beside a group of residents from the Haven, including Walter, whose hands trembled not from cold, but from emotion. Mavis had pinned a hand-drawn medal to her shawl, and Gus wore a wooden dog-shaped brooch on his coat. Sarah arrived last breathless from parking 3 blocks away. She wore a deep red peacoat and a knit beanie, her curls escaping in soft spirals. When she saw Brutus on stage, her smile cracked wide. She elbowed her way to the front and lifted her phone to snap a photo. "You better not blink, hero," she whispered under her breath. At exactly 11 a.m., Mayor Daniel Whitaker took the podium. A man in his late 50s with a commanding presence and silver-streaked hair, Whitaker had been mayor for nearly a decade and carried a reputation for fairness and dignity. Today he spoke with rare warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his breath fogging the microphone, "we're here not only to honor a brave act, but to recognize something much deeper. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves quietly on 4 legs beside someone who was once just as misunderstood." He looked toward Tyler and nodded. Brutus, he continued, was once labeled dangerous, rejected, nearly discarded, but today he stands as a symbol of hope, healing, and loyalty. In stopping a crime and comforting our elderly, and in reminding this town what redemption looks like, he has earned a place in all our hearts. From a velvet-lined box, the mayor withdrew a custom metal bronze etched with the town seal on one side and the words "Guardian of Willow Creek" on the other. He approached slowly and crouched before Brutus, who didn't flinch. Tyler knelt beside him and gently clipped the medal to the dog's vest. A wave of applause rose from the crowd, cheers whistles, even a few tears. Brutus remained still, but proud tail wagging once in a slow, heavy arc. After the ceremony, people gathered around to offer thanks. Children patted Brutus's head, while adults exchanged quiet stories of their own rescues, their own Brutus moments. A boy no older than 9 handed Tyler a crayon drawing of Brutus, with a red cape titled "The Brave Dog." As the crowd began to thin, Dr. Rickman approached Tyler. "You've given a lot of folks here something real," the doctor said. "Some of our residents have shown emotional improvements we hadn't seen in years." Tyler nodded. "Brutus gave me something real first." Rickman offered a smile. "We'd like to bring both of you on officially, therapy and crisis response partnership. You'd set your own schedule. Think about it." That evening, Tyler sat in his living room, with the fireplace crackling low and Brutus curled on the rug beside him. The medal hung from a hook near the front door just beneath a framed newspaper clipping with the headline, "From Misjudged to Medal-Worthy, Willow Creek's Bravest Soul Has 4 Legs." Tyler looked at the fire, the soft flickering light dancing on the walls. "You know," he said to Brutus, "I don't think I believed in heroes anymore. But then, you walked into my life." Brutus lifted his head slightly and placed it in Tyler's lap. Tyler smiled. "You didn't just change me. You changed a whole town." Weeks passed, then months. Brutus became a regular presence not just at the Haven, but at community centers, schools, and even local therapy sessions for veterans. Wherever he went, stories followed. stories of peace found beside paw prints. And one spring afternoon, long after the snow had melted and the maple trees bloomed again, a young man stood on the Haven's porch holding his grandmother's hand. He pointed to a photo pinned beside the front desk, a photo of Brutus lying peacefully between Walter and Mavis, both smiling in a way only truth can draw out. "That's him," the boy whispered. "That's the dog from the story." His grandmother smiled, eyes wet. "He's not just a dog, sweetheart. He's proof that sometimes the ones we fear most are the ones who save us. Sometimes what the world throws away is exactly what God chooses to redeem." Brutus wasn't just a dog with a scarred past. He was a quiet miracle sent not to impress the world with power, but to remind us that healing often comes through love, patience, and second chances. In our everyday lives, we walk past people and even animals who carry unseen pain. But maybe God is calling us to pause, to notice, and to believe that grace can live where no one expects it. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment to tell us your thoughts, subscribe to the channel for more real stories of faith and healing, and take a moment to say a prayer for yourself, for someone you love, or for a soul like Brutus waiting to be seen. Write Amen in the comments if you believe that no one is ever too broken to be loved. May God bless you for watching.